We now come to this next position, which looks like a Lucena, but the pawn is on the 6th rank, not on the 7th,
Mm-hmm.
and it creates a lot of difference.
Yes. So I think one way to approach these kind of positions, it can get very tricky. So few things I think we can make thumb rules. Number one, black needs the rook on a file. That is 100%, because this we saw in the previous previous game, right? If it is on the b file, then the king kind of catches the rook once you start this side check. So your rook has to be on the a file. Second thing, so as you know, I hate memorizing. There is no point in memorizing anything that you do not understand. I'll give you a classic example which will come next, but
Okay.
we'll wait there. One thing to understand is if white gets king e8 and next move he's playing e7 and you don't have any special plan against it, you're just dead lost. You cannot do anything. So each time you make a move here, it has to be something which is stopping two things. One, there is no rook g1 check.
This has to be stopped, because if you check here, it's game over.
Yes.
He's already cut off, and then the king moves in, and you can just.
Yes. And second thing is king e8 has to be stopped. So rook a7 check.
Black, yeah, okay.
Now, if white goes king e8,
Yeah,
you can, for example, just play king f6 and just win this pawn.
yeah.
So white goes rook.
Because this is also a check threat, and you're going to lose this pawn.
So rook d7 here. And now, once again, it's the same thing. You cannot allow king e8. So the most natural move would be to play rook a8.
Stopping king e8.
Stop king a8. If he plays rook d8 check again, if he plays rook d8, you have rook a7 check. So this doesn't bother. If king d6 check, you have king f8. Your king is just going, and again you have all the side checks. So there is no.
Once the king comes here, it's a draw.
Yes.
So that's no problem.
So rook a8 is very simple. However, in that position with rook on a7, you could also play something like rook a1.
So, here.
Yeah. Now the question is, how did we stop king e8? Because all this time we were saying king e8 wins, right? So king e8 check, king f6, absolutely only move.
Now I'm threatening to take the pawn. So
e7
push.
And now again only move, and this is very, very important. Otherwise, you're.
Should they pause and try to think?
They can pause and try to think.
Guys, black to play. What should black do here? Only move.
Only move, yes.
To draw.
Yes.
Okay. So what's the move?
So the move is king e6. And the whole point is we cannot move the rook on the side because, of course, there is rook a8 check happening. We cannot move the rook on the d file because then again rook a8 check, rook d8, and let's say rook a7. You just get the pawn. So only other option is
here, here,
rook a7.
And this is fine.
So the only other option is king f8. And here once again only move.
Check.
That is the check. So without this check, it is a.
It's lost.
It's lost. Now just go back to the previous move. And if you can draw after king f8, if you can draw some arrows from a1 to f1, a2 to f2, like that. Draw some arrows, yeah. Go on. And then there is no check. Which means.
Because the king is in the middle.
Which means in the starting position, like where, this rook d7 happened, rook a6 is the only move that is losing. Before we do this position, can we go to the next game once and then come back here again?
Sure.
So let's do that.
Let me see if I can. This is your game.
Yes.
With Nisipiano.
Yes. So we were playing some very long game.
You are white.
I'm white here, yeah.
So you are defending.
Yeah, and okay, I was 25-74.
Okay.
Decently
strong, yeah.
Decently strong.
I think.
But okay, so my endgame knowledge, and as a matter of fact, apart from probably Hari and Sashi, all the Indian players, back then had very poor endgame knowledge, although they were grandmasters. So Vladimirov came to training camp. Yeah, like he was teaching. I remember in Calicut we were staying in Taj Hotel, and for 1 month we were doing only endgames.
This is Evgeny
Evgeny
Vladimirov, who
Vladimirov.
is a very famous trainer.
Trainer, yeah, and a big expert on endgames. And he was absolutely shocked, like with our endgame knowledge. He was literally teaching us what also we are going to see, in basic thing, whether it's Lucena or pawn on a7, a6,
And
so on.
how strong were you at that point? 2500 plus.
2500 plus. Yeah.
Wow.
There was Abhijit Kunte, there was Sandeepan Chanda, like there were many strong players, but we had very poor endgame knowledge.
Mm.
And he taught us many endgames, yeah, like, and then we were good to go. And then couple of months or maybe a year later, I am playing this game. This is very important to everyone watching out there, that half remembering is the worst thing you can do, right? Like this you don't want. You should sit down and calculate, or you are 100% sure you understand things. So I'm playing with Nisipiano. This is what, move 76. And after a long fight, it was first initially a double rook endgame. Then we got to this position. My opponent plays rook e2. I remembered Vladimirov. I literally remember his face and everything, in this training room, how he was showing. And all I remember was, this is the only move. Rook on third rank. This is the only move. I remembered the second part of the sentence, that this is the only move that loses. So,
that loses, you didn't remember.
This I did not remember. I remember this is the only move. I blitz out, like we were in seconds, and I blitz out rook b3. This is the only move. And I lost this game because of the same reason, king f1. Okay, here I realized there is no, after f2 I realized there is no check. I cannot play king f3.
So if king f3,
now king g1,
king g1, and check. There's no rook check.
That's it.
My God.
So that's why you should never, you better understand it and don't try to memorize these things. Otherwise, you will have to pay like this, the way I paid.
How did you feel after this game?
This is another hilarious story. So, there was this closed event and also some open event was going on. So, as soon as I come out of the tournament hall, this Tanya is there. And she's like, gangs, how come you don't know this? This is the only winning move, only losing move. See, even here, even now, I'm like, only winning move. This is the only losing move. And then it struck me, yes, it is the only move, but that loses.
So Tanya Sachdev there reminding you of what the right way was. But this one is a very instructive position. We can go back to
yes, we should. Yeah,
previous one, and just so that we can remember this, because as you guys can see, even very strong players make this error. So here, check, rook d7, rook a8, very important move. And now
let's say if you play rook d8, I have rook a7, as we said, and king d6, I still have rook a6 check, so this is not bothering. And there is a very tricky move, and none other than Magnus Carlsen fell for it in the one move before, after rook a7 check.
So here rook a7, rook d7,
sorry, rook a8. Yeah, now the move rook d6. This is a very tricky move that everyone should clearly understand.
Rook d6, I don't even know why this move is made. And if I was playing with the black pieces, by the way, you guys should pause and think.
You have to pause.
What is the best move for black to hold?
Yes.
But if I was playing Surya, I would have definitely jumped and given a check.
Then you would be exactly like Magnus Carlsen.
Okay, that's nice to hear.
And that's how he lost.
Magnus at his worst, yeah?
Yeah. So Levon was white, and I think the game was rook a7 or rook a1, but it's the same anyway. Remember the first thing I said, like, it is very important that you have a plan after king e8. This is super important. So whether you play rook a7 or you put the rook on a1 or anywhere, it does not matter. White's move is the same. He is going to play king e8. And compared to the previous position, when he will play king f6, e7 comes with a check. That changes everything, and that's the point of
rook d6.
Rook d6. So your rook is kind of stuck. You cannot put it anywhere on the a5. Let's say rook a7, you can make the move. So king e8. Now suddenly, if you play king f6, there is e7. One argument could be, why not to play rook a8 check instead of king f6? But now I play rook d8. The difference with previous position is my king is on e8 now. You can play rook a7, but now I play e7. And once again, you could not do anything special. And I got my king on e8, back to Lucena.
Right, and this position is totally winning. Surya, once I was trying to solve this out, and I was thinking to myself, how to win now? I was a bit confused. But then I later figured out that you don't have to move your rook anywhere, just rook c8 and king d8 should do it.
Yes. So, getting back to this rook d6 position. So, basically, your rook on a8 cannot move on the a file.
Right.
Because there is king e8 happening. It cannot go to b file or c file as we have seen before, because then the distance is very short.
If just we can see once, then rook d8, check.
And let's say king d6, for example. Because now after rook b6 check, okay, I go king d7, rook b7, and I can play king c6 with a 10. Rook a7 is rook d7.
And now this check is threatened, and this is winning.
So that means your rook on a8 is actually fixed. What is white's threat? By the way, this is one thing I always tell to everyone. Like, no matter what is the position, always ask two questions. As soon as your opponent makes a move or in any calculation, what is my opponent threatening? And next is, do I need to defend it? Because if you constantly ask what is my opponent threatening, you will be constantly defending, like boxing. But it's also important to back it up with, do I need to stop it? Is there a threat right now?
Well, if you think about it, if I go king d7, then I have king f8, e7, then king f7.
Yes.
And that is a drawn position.
Yes.
So actually there is not really a threat.
There is no threat. There is zero.
But that's the problem in chess. You have to make a move.
So now your rook cannot move.
Yeah.
Then by elimination, you know what is your move. It has to be a king move. It cannot go to g8. You would not put it on h8 or h7. So only move is king g6.
Nice.
What is black's? Oh, if this was black to play, what is your move?
King g7 back.
Only move.
Right.
So it's the same thing, yeah. So yeah, that is basically all from this position that one needs to know.
So after this king g6, if I go back and try to give you a check, you will simply continue with a check.
Because now again you don't have king e8, I have king f6, and you are missing the e7 check.
Correct. And just to be very sure, if rook b6 here trying to wait it out, I believe just king g7 should be okay.
Easily, yeah. Because no threats again.
Cool. So this is was very instructive, and keep in mind the Surya's game with Nisipiano. Yes. I think that is the most important game to remember.
Yes.